Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to wait just for maybe about 15 to 30 seconds while people join from the virtual lobby. We'll get started in just a couple of seconds. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As I said, we're just giving a little breath here for people to join us from the virtual lobby, but we will go ahead and get started. Thank you again for joining us. Hello, and welcome to the webinar, the SAP Role Makeover, Fast Tracking Your S/4HANA Migration with Smarter Role Design. I'm Sean Byers with SAPinsider, and I have a couple of quick announcements before we begin. This session is being recorded, and a copy of today's recording will be emailed to you following the session. If you are joining us live, the webinar is designed to be interactive between you and the presenter. So we invite you to submit your questions using the Q&A text box at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. We will answer as many questions as time allows. If we do run out of time, someone from the team will get back to you as quickly as possible to answer your question. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Joining me today is Alan Cutting, Senior Solutions Architect from Pathlock. Alan, over to you.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. Today, we are going to talk about fast-tracking your migration to S/4HANA. On the agenda, we'll do a brief introduction. We'll talk about some challenges with role redesigns in general and S/4HANA migrations in particular. We'll go into the methods for fast tracking in section 3, and then we'll show you how one of our tools uses the methods in step 3 there to streamline role migrations in HANA. So my name is Alan Cutting. I've been doing SAP security and audit support for a bit over 25 years. I've done lots of SAP security, SAP GRC and Pathlock GRC implementations and migrations during that time. Did a couple of years as project office for major SAP projects. I got some background there, and I did some financial configuration and MM as well many years ago. I'm certified in IT security and as an IT systems auditor. About Pathlock, many of you may know that Pathlock came together a few years ago when some of the leading firms in the ERP governance space came together. Today, we have over 1,300 customers globally and a full suite of security compliance features like application access security, continuous controls, and cybersecurity controls. We've got a team of certified auditors and dedicated functional people and programmers working in SAP, Oracle, Workday, etc. So in the access governance lifecycle, excuse me, today we'll be looking at the first step in that, which is role design. Pathlock has products for all of these phases, and if you're interested, I'm sure our people would love to talk to you about what we can do in the other places here. So first, challenges with role redesigns and S/4HANA. Why do we need to periodically revise security roles? You may have separation of duties risk in your current roles. There may have been many business changes since the roles were designed, organization changes, mergers, spin-offs, acquisitions. It can leave you with a mishmash of roles that get hard to understand over time. The original people that designed these roles and named them may have moved on. They may be very hard to read names, so that a new person coming in to the team can really have trouble deciding which roles to use. Maybe duplication in the roles, unused transactions, outdated transactions. Finally, license optimization, which I think is going to become more important as everyone moves to HANA. There are changes coming down the pike with how licenses are assigned by SAP. And in the past, whereas security roles were functional, you wanted to make sure they worked. And now you need to really make sure that they're fine-tuned and not including transactions or objects, which are going to put you in a higher, a more expensive bucket for your licenses. So those are all reasons for role redesigns. The next question is, well, why don't we do them more often? And these are factors that come into it. Time, it usually takes a long time to do a full role redesign. You've got to get with the business, discuss with them the different positions they have, what people are doing, what transactions they need. Uh, Testing time takes a lot of time from the business and security for fixing roles. All of that time costs money, so that's a consideration. If people are already fully booked, you may have some people you've got to pay overtime to, or you need to bring in consultants and pay them. So that's another factor. You may not have the skills in-house to do a full-blown role redesign and move to HANA. So you may bring in consultants for that. And then you've got the risk of if you go to production and the new roles fail on anything, you're going to impact the business, and then you're going to have fire drills to get them temporary access and then get roles fixed um, and get people running again. With that, uh, security people or project managers who've had previous projects with role redesigns, if they've been bitten before, they may not be really eager to sign on to another one now, and they may try to muddle by with what they've got. In the case of HANA, that's not going to work too well because it's a major change. So with HANA, as you probably all know, SAP re-engineered its solutions for business processes. So there's mass simplifications, that's what they call it, in processes and in data models. Their goal was to get rid of a lot of the custom programming that customers were doing and bring in more into the SAP tool itself. This has a huge impact on the security roles. Going to be a lot of changes needed. And as such, it should be regarded as a major upgrade. And most transactions should be tested. And that takes time. Um, as far as impact, uh, a huge number of transactions have been replaced, some with new transactions, others with Fiore tiles. A final factor is some shops are moving for a rapid migration to HANA. I think this is sometimes when you are getting an outside integrator to do the technical backbone for you. They're put out timelines with a very compressed time scale, and then they're not factoring in security work when they do that. They're looking at hardware. So security may find themselves, under a lot of pressure to get the time done within this time frame. So now we're going to look at methods that you can use to fast track your application, your move to S/4HANA. The first method we suggest is base your new roles on transactions that people actually use. It's estimated that end users typically only use 40 to 50%, if that, of the transactions that they have assigned. You can simplify your role transactions and the objects that the transactions pull in by only assigning what is needed. A second method is reduce the time that you spend on reviewing, I'm sorry, on silence, but it doesn't work. Reduce analysis time that you spend on figuring out what the S4 new transactions are. SAP changes transactions and makes additions with each new SAP release. Is usually not that big a deal, but HANA has probably thousands of new transactions in Fiori tiles. And so you need to go through a simplification guide to find out which ones are going to affect you. That's about 1,000 pages long and refers you to a bunch of OSS notes. It's no fun, and it can take a couple weeks to do that for the security guys. So that's another way. A third way is automate your building of ABAP and Fiori roles. It'll give you better consistency, accuracy, and time savings. Um, It'll also help you keep track of the status of your roles in the migration process. If you got it automated, it'll be much easier to just go ahead and automate the status as well. And finally, use automation to reduce your testing time and improve results. Testing, as you all know, can be long and frustrating because it's basically try and then fail in QA. The analyst has a script they work off. They do some testing. If they run into something, they've got to run a security report, get it back to security, and get the fix. They usually can't complete that script, so they have to move to another script. And they get frustrated, and after a while, the business user goes back to their day job, and you'll have to get them back again later. That combined with tight timelines means that all your functionality may not adequately be tested. So if you can automate this, you can improve your results and reduce testing time. Excuse me. So now we're going to look at the Pathlog Role Management Suite and how that relies on these methods and some other things to really fast track or lessen the time that it takes to design, build, and test the roles. It's made up of 3 modules: Role Designer, which is for new role design; Role Validation for testing of the new roles. It will also work on existing roles; and Role Lifecycle Management, which takes the new functionality which we developed for new roles for Role Designer and Validation. It took that and did some programming and brings it available to existing roles. So it's got a number of functions for role management and also from some of the role designing and validation can be used on pre-existing roles. Today, we're mostly going to be talking about role designer and validation, not on role lifecycle. So Role Designer automates many of the tasks in designing, building, and testing roles. It greatly reduces the length of role redesign projects, and we'll see how. It builds roles that are built on least privilege, big thing for us security people. They're tested for separations of duties prior to creating the roles in SAP. It includes a role builder for Fiori roles. It has a module for automated unit testing of roles, which means it tests all of the transactions that are in the new roles and makes sure that they will open in the new role. We can't guarantee that they will work through from soup to nuts because we can't test it all the way through because there are so many branches you can go through in a T code, but we'll make sure that you can actually open up the T codes, and it lowers risk during go live, and we'll see more about that. So getting back to our four methods to easing the road to HANA, the first was base roles on transactions that people actually use. So Role Designer has features like capturing transaction usage and consolidating it by position. Then you can then look at it by position because we build position-based roles. For example, an accounts payable clerk in the finance department of the US. Um, it will show you the used and unused roles, transactions that the people you have associated with this new position. It'll show you what transactions they've actually used and give you a breakdown of how much they've used them. You can then include those transactions or exclude with the click of a button. And this can lower your volume of transactions to be tested by 40 to 60%, and it lowers risk. It's the less objects and transactions you have in the role, the less vectors you have towards a risk. So an example of, let me move something on my screen. An example of a screen and role designer. It does sit in the SAP system. It is loaded by importing transport, so it's up and running very quickly. On this screen, we see a list of transactions and their descriptions. We can also see that it analyzed 4 people because we assigned 4 people to this role, USA Finance Accounts Payable Clerk. So we have some test data in this system, and it will show the interactions, which is another word for executions, um, but it's more specific than executions because some transactions you can go in them and they have so much going on that you could go into them once and spend the whole day in one transaction. So we measure interactions, and then we also look at how many users that the interactions were spread across. And they give you a percentage usage, which is just the user count divided by the users analyzed. So basically here, you're looking at the transactions that were used, and you're looking first at the high percentage of usage. You want to get the transactions that a great deal of the department are using, and you'll normally have more than 4 users. You might put 10 people in here, whatever you want. You'll really want to include the high percentage or the high interactions. You may have just a few people, a lower percent, but they've got a lot of interactions, and it's obvious they know that. Um, you can look at the users by name if you want to, and if you're allowed to for privacy reasons. You may find out that you've included someone here that should actually be in another role. So there's other information you can get out of here, but the transactions that nobody's used, it's probably a no-brainer that you probably don't need them in this role. You can put them in a firefighter role or a checkout role. So with this, you will build a display role and a maintain role for that position. And the tool will build the role for you in a virtual environment. Two was automate research on S/4HANA transactions. So as I said, this is documented in simplification guides, which some of us have had to go through by hand in the past. We have a module within the tool that will do this for you. You simply put in the configuration, you put the tool that you're on right now, that you generated your history in, and the tool, excuse me, the version of SAP that you're moving to, higher version of ECC or S/4HANA, and Role Manager will suggest new transactions if applicable. So for XDO1, it might suggest that you use BP instead. When you get the suggestion, you have the option of adding BP, replacing XD01, or if you're feeling lucky today, you can ignore the recommendation. It's all under your control. Um, the screen to do that is actually on a screen very similar to this, and it's got another column over to the right, and in that column, if there were new transactions available, the entry would not be grayed out. You would see it here, and you can go right into that. Very easy to learn how to use, and saves your security team. It can save a couple weeks of time there. The third method that we recommend, I'm just checking how I'm doing for time. The third method we recommend is to use a tool for building the security roles. So Role Designer has a number of features for ABAP-based roles. It can build the roles for you based on the role transactions that you selected. It'll find the role name and role description, enter the long text details, and construct a structured role menu. So your transactions will be neatly arranged in folders, and it will define the role org levels for each position automatically. Now, to do this, you will have done some configuration at the beginning when you first set up the tool for role naming conventions and some other logic on how the tool is going to perform certain types of operations. And you will also put in master data, which will include some SAP org level information, basically what different positions are going to get. There's flexibility the way you put that in. Um, so you basically you do that work up front before you do the roles. And we select you do like one department of roles at a time. You can start, let's say, with headquarters functions. So you're working with company codes and things like that. Later on, you might do a department that includes the warehouses, and you might have plants. And so you're more concerned with plants or sales organization, things like that. When you start that department, you make sure you get the data in for the org levels that are going to be needed. And then later on, when you actually build the roles, it will populate those. And if you're going to build, let's say, derived roles for 200 different plants, you'll have put in that information in one spot in the beginning. You actually can put it in a spreadsheet to ease the data entry, upload it into the tool, and then you can create all of the derived roles at one time, and you don't have to stop and manually put in the orgs for each warehouse. So very nifty function. It saves errors and saves security a lot of time. It speeds up the process. Another feature is we have template roles. So if you have not built roles for a particular department before, we may have a template that you can base that on and put in industry typical transactions. Um, Another feature role designer has, it performs SOT checks. Um, you can see risk within the tool for a given position. You will see the functions that make up the risk and the transactions that are causing the transactions that are being combined that cause the risk. You can then decide, are you going to leave some transactions out and maybe put them in a checkout role? Do you need to put them in a different position? Or if you have to leave them in, are you going to accept the risk? And if you accept the risk and later on your audit people are going to need to mitigate that risk. That's the mitigation is not done within the tool. But the point is you identify and you deal with your risk now for given positions rather than dealing with it later when you put a whole bunch of task-based roles together and then run an SOD check on it and see, oh my God, it's got all these risks in it. You deal with it upfront here. The tool will create standalone maintenance, display, and composite roles. If you are using derived roles, it will create those. And the build process will automatically test all of the transactions in each one of these roles. So a lot of time saving involved in here. Excuse me. On the Fiori side, role designer can build Fiori roles. It will build the creation or take care of the creation of spaces and pages. Our design team is keeping up with some of the changes going on in Fiori now. As new things are added, they take that into account here. Um, it will also look up the services for you, so you don't have to do that manually. Um, you can look up the Fiori tiles either based on your transactional history or line of business application component and so forth. The Fiori roles are then built and they're automatically included in the position composite role. Um, Another thing is the Fiori tool will work whether all of your SAP is in one server, or if you're internet facing, you may have a front end server and a back end server. Front end server for the Fiori stuff, and the tool can handle that. Okay, method 4, use method automation to reduce testing time while improving results. We spoke about it, the automatic unit testing. In our role validation process, the users will perform their usual work in production. And this is kind of a game changer or a change in how we normally do things, but they will do their validation in production. Uh, Role manager has an automated trace and evaluation routine, which would determine if the new role for those users has the needed authorization that is checked when they execute a transaction. If they do not have it in the new role, that will be noted by the trace, and the users have what we would call a safety net to fall back on, which will be checked next. And if they have the access in their safety net, which is access that they would have had previously in that position, let's say accounts payable. If they had that yesterday, uh, they will be able to fall back to it today when they're testing if the new role does not work. So you don't have a big commotion in production. The users won't even know that the security on the new role failed, but security will be able to review reports and fix it in development. I might add that the roles we build have a lot less access than the old users have because we reduce a lot of transactions and objects during the role build. We have already looked at the SOD part. So generally, these roles contain less access than the users have currently. Um, this is a sample report of the role validation analysis within the tool. It's not hard to read like normal trace reports are. Over on the left, we have the transaction code and then a status on how it performed in the test. And the test is of this accounts payable clerk in finance in the USA region. Excuse me. In the status, really, we're only concerned here on the reference user. Now, I could run a filter here, which would only have shown you to reference user errors here. I find it more interesting to show all of them, but we can run a filter there, and you would only see the reference users. The only ones you need to action are the reference users on this page, and this is just example runs, but they are actual failures. It shows you the security object, the field, and the field value that they failed on. And so you look at this, you see, does this look reasonable to put in the role? Does this activity look reasonable? And as long as it does, you're good with it. The magic is you're in production looking at this production trace within the tool. You click a button and the tool makes the changes for you on your role, which is back down in development. And then you can transport the revised versions of the roles using your normal transport procedures, um, transport them up to production. The user won't even know it, but continue testing, and over a period of hours and days, maybe weeks, the errors will become less and less, and you will become more comfortable of these people um, using the tool without the safety net. So some additional features that role management has, it has workflow approvals before you actually build the role in SAP proper. In the beginning, you're just working on a virtual role that is within the path-lock namespace. Um, and you have another approval. These are optional, but it's before you actually deploy the roles to users in production. The rollout is done in stages to lower risk and build confidence in the new roles. We have a status report which will show you where roles are in this process. So initially they'll have a safety net and they can fall back instantaneously. The user will not even notice it. When you feel safe enough, whether that's weeks or a couple months, or it's after, let's say, quarter close, where maybe you have some activities that are not executed all quarter, at some point you can go to an intermediate stage where the old access is removed, but it can be quickly re-added in moments to get them working back again with the safety net. You can stay on that during the course of sorting things out. When you feel comfortable again, you can go back to uh, having that old access inactivated. And finally, you can totally remove the old access, remove the safety net entirely, and then they're flying just on the new roles. And even then, there's some optional functionality that's been added to add add access back quickly, but we won't really get into that today. Um, Another feature is you can add role quality checks to the roles you're generating. If you have some rules of thumb as to what makes a good role, you can do that. You've got some KPIs that you can do for what stages your whole project is in, from construction to testing, how your project is doing. You can add that in. Um, as I said, you've got automated audit trails, which is very important to the auditors. And finally, the tool will generate documentation in PDF form for all of the roles. So a lot of people on your team will really appreciate this. So I think that's it for the main part of this program. Uh, in review, we went over these top 4 bullets, the methods to fast track your SAP migration to HANA, and also talked about some other efficient things that you could do that will save time and improve results. So, Sean, at this point, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you so much, Ellen. That was a really, really great presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today. We do have a number of questions in our Q&A chat. Just a quick reminder to the audience, we do invite you to submit any questions that you have by using the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. We're going to try to get to as many of those as time allows. First off here, the first question that I have is they actually said thank you so much for the presentation, but they said what is the SAP best practice for tackling the great complexity of role redesign in S/4HANA, considering both the licensing part of HANA and the 2 different user environments? GUI and Fiori, especially if the customer chooses a greenfield migration process from ECC. Is there any documentation regarding this issue available that we can refer to as an implementation guideline? And thank you in advance.
Okay. Um, I haven't looked at the documentation lately that SAP has put out, but your starting point would be what people are doing today, and our tool can map what they're doing today and point you towards Fiori tiles. So a good thing to do is we would suggest getting Transaction Archive, or you could figure out a way to do it yourself, but capture history within SAP. Preferably the longer time frame you can capture, the better. See what transactions are being used the most and see how they map over to Fiori. Um, we have help within our tool to do that, but I know that SAP has a website to do that as well. And on building Fiori, that's there are, I'm sure the people on the call know that there's a security component to that, and there's also a web component to that. So uh, particularly on the website, they need some expertise or business expertise on the website. Our Fiori part is assuming that the website is done, but um, our tool will actually help you pick out Fiori tiles and set up the namespaces, the pages, excuse me, and look up the services, which looking up the services by hand is a real pain. So having a tool that can automate that, that would really make your life a lot easier. So I'd be looking for a documentation out there and a tool that will help you. So, okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Another one that we have here is how do you know people are doing how do you know people are doing in prod?
Okay. Well, SAP by nature traces everything that users are doing in prod anyway. The problem is that that's a lot of data. And so within, I think it's a week to 10 days, it might be 10 days to 2 weeks, SAP starts consolidating that data, it compresses it, and it shows you less and less detail. And it reaches the point where the detail we need is not in there anymore. So what we recommend is you can get data out of SAP through the trace functions that are in there, which Basis is well familiar with, and security. But it helps to have a tool in there that captures your history and keeps it for you. So as part of our tool, we have Transaction Archive, which is actually a tool on itself. It runs daily, even more frequently if needed, to capture the SAP data, and it will capture all the SAP user data that is relevant for a role redesign. It will compress the data, but it will keep all the data you need to know which users are using which transactions. And um, it captures some more than that, but that's uh, the main part of what we need. You get that, and if you plan it correctly, like if they were to purchase our software and get that part of the software into production quickly, while the rest of the role redesign is being talked about and ramped up, you can maybe capture 3 months of data, of detailed data there with TA, and on top of whatever data SAP has not compressed to the point where it's not usable. And that might be maybe another 2 months, maybe three, I'm not sure. But you might be able to get 5 or 6 months of user data that way to base your transactions on. And again, with Fiori, I'd be looking back at if you can capture what transactions they're using now, you can map that over to what Fiori tiles would be in play. But you need to preserve as much history as you can. Um, our customers that are already using Transaction Archive can use 13 months of history, and that's great because it takes you through all your quarter ends as well as year end. So that's ideal, but not everybody's going to have that.
Perfect, perfect. Another question here. For clients with high number of custom transactions, is the tool looking into which T codes included on a program and provide recommendations, new T codes, tiles, etc.? Is this part of the tool's capabilities?
Probably not out of the box. What you do is during our configuration and master data phase, in master data, we've got a bunch of tables that we deliver that are pre-populated. tables that tell our tool that this transaction is a display transaction, or this one is uh, an update transaction. Um, some of those tables you would want to update and add the custom transactions, which probably start with a Z or a Y or something that identifies them very easily. You could add them to a couple of our tables uh, where it might help you. Um, there are probably programs that your own programmers could whip out a custom program. I don't think our tool is going to do it, but a lot of custom programs are actually based on SAP programs. They're just making them safer. They're a subset. So they might be able to see that Y underscore SE16 is really calling SE16, and in which case your programmers could probably come up and tell you that your custom program is really looking at SE16, and that could be put into the mix to help you bring in the objects that you need, or that your YE16 that you need to add in some objects corresponding to the SE16. So there's some stuff that can probably be partially automated, but I don't think our tool right out of the box is going to do that.
Okay, excellent. Another question here. I assume you have to have your SOD risks assigned in GRC in order for the role designer to identify SOD risks in the role build.
Yeah, excuse me. Our tool, the role manager, the role management family, um, as part of the role redesign, it has a separations of duties module, and so that module is based on the path default uh, SOD rule set. It's used in a number of our products, and it's got, if I'm not mistaken, it's got hundreds of risks defined in it. Uh, Usually, your risks are made up of two different functions, such as in AP, you don't want a clerk to be able to create a vendor and then process an invoice from that vendor, because they might make a mistake or they might do something bad. Uh, Most of the risk in our uh, rule set have two functions in them like that. It's possible some are single function. Within our tool, we can define things as being a risk, high risk, such as S underscore develop in security is a pretty hot object. You might want to flag that so that whenever the tool proposes that the security person has to look at it and approve that before it goes in a role. But the short answer is that we do have a default rule set that is included with the product. If the customer is using their own rule set, that can be translated into our product. I know we have people that have translated the SAP rule set before, so they have experience with that. If there are other rule sets that can probably be done, there might be an added charge for that, would be my guess. But yes, you do need a rule set involved early on in the role creation process.
Perfect. Thank you. I think we have time for maybe two more questions. I know that there were a lot of questions today. Don't worry, everyone. do have the expert on the line. I will make sure, we will make sure that all of those questions get sent over to the team, and any of the questions that were not answered live today, we will follow up with you as soon as
Excuse me.
possible. But we do have time for a couple of more, I think. One more here. We are using similar safety net functionality slash live testing. But the problem is that the existing roles would not have been converted to S/4HANA roles. I'm assuming, of course, that we are redesigning, converting existing roles to S4. So wouldn't that invalidate the safety net functionality?
There are some concerns with that. It it makes it more complex when you go to HANA, but there are ways that we recommend using the tool in QA where you can get the full benefit. It takes away some of the productivity that you have in going directly to production, but the tool can accommodate you to a large extent in QA, and you can use it there. But I know what they're talking about. But I've only been exposed to it briefly, and I've gone over it with the developer, so I know his recommendations, but I would take those up offline.
Okay, perfect. And I think we have time for one more here. How is the SOD check performed? Do you have any kind of rule set in the tool? And does it already perform analysis at Fiori apps level?
Um, the SOD rule set that we include has the Fiori apps in it, and it's updated regularly. If SAP added a new Fiori app last week, I can't guarantee that last week's Fiori app would be in the tool today. I would reckon it probably would not be, but we regularly add new Fiori apps to the rule set. If you were to look at the rule set in native SAP, it's very obvious that they have a tab related just to the Fiori functions in addition to the transactions. So that is taken into account while the user is testing. Um, the the unit test, I'm not as sure about the unit test with Fiori. Um, I'd have to verify that that when you click on the tile, that one is tested in advance. But Fiori activity, even its interactions with access that has come from other security roles that the user might have, that will show up as an SOD risk.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you to our audience for great questions here. That is all of the time that we have for today. Again, I just want to reiterate, I know that there was a lot of interaction in the Q&A chat box. If we didn't get to your questions, someone from the team will get back to you as soon as possible to get those answered for you. As a final reminder to the audience, this webinar will be available on SAPinsider as a webinar on demand, and all of the registrants will receive a link via email. A special thank you to Alan for joining us today on this great discussion. And on behalf of SAPinsider and Pathlock, thank you to our audience members for your time, for your wonderful participation, and we hope that you all have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.